asked me to be a part of this block party, all I can think about when I think about summer is linens blowing in the breeze and the feel of cotton tablecloths and eating outside and even sailing with textiles moving me along the water. So I thought I would come talk about what to choose to wear, how you can use some different criteria for making decisions, and also how to care for your things. About me here. As you can see, this was not taken today, but I am wearing the same thing. That's because I have a nice curated wardrobe and I don't have to make many choices in a day before I get out of the house. So here we are. I have been making things since I've been using a sewing machine since I was 5 years old. I am passionate about making clothes. I am passionate about making clothes fit a variety of people in different shaped, aged, colored background bodies, and making sure that my clients who are independent sewing pattern designers or small manufacturers can pass that inclusivity along to their customers. I make custom clothing, and I've been doing that since high school for other people. I've been making clothes for myself since I first made myself a Halloween costume in middle school, and it was the Statue of Liberty. A lot of draping involved there. And I have recently been trained in lean manufacturing for sewn goods. And in fact, during the pandemic last summer, I helped to start an ethical small batch factory here in Seattle that employs refugees. It may be their first job coming over here at a living wage, usually their first paycheck, and using as circular an economy as possible. So that was pretty fantastic. What a wonderful opportunity. I have been teaching sewing lessons as long as I've known how to sew, and since the first person asked me back also in high school. And I am pretty comfortable being your sewing fairy godmother. I feel like every time we make something with our hands, or every time we purchase something made by hands from someone else, we have an opportunity to interact with a culture, whether it's our own or someone else's. We have an opportunity to interact with the land where the fibers or animals were grown and nurtured. And we have an opportunity to interact with our own ancestral practices. So I'd like to share how as we go through this presentation. So I'm going to divide this into 4 sections. I'm going to talk about sustainable choices. I'm going to talk about considerations for a garment's life cycle. Obviously, this will apply to other kinds of sewn goods or linens that you have at home, like towels, sheets, bedding, curtains, upholstery. Any of those things can be considered inside this life cycle. I'm going to talk about care as a practice. And when I refer to a practice, I'm talking about a mindful, connected practice. And then again, about ancestral connection. Again, when I think about summer, I think about natural loose garments, usually light colors, though always black on Saturday for me. Natural fibers are easy to wear. They are comfortable, depending on how they're constructed. They can be very durable. They're easy to clean using other natural kinds of soaps and processes, and they're easy to mend. So even if they weren't constructed beautifully, or if you bought them secondhand and they have some things that need repair, or if you want to make them fit you better, they're really easy to mend and forgiving. And they're easy to upcycle or downcycle into other products and garments. And they're also easier to recycle. So you may have heard a lot about recycled plastic bottles in fibers, and that is a process that's used pretty commonly to give us what's called an ethical or environmentally friendly garment. And it is in that it's keeping those bottles out of the landfills. But if we stuck with natural fibers in the first place, they actually biodegrade. And so they have a way that they can contribute back to the soil. And in trying to maintain a circle instead of simply a straight line with waste at the end, they can also be recycled. There's a company here in Seattle, and there are a couple other companies in the US that I know of. I'm sure there are companies in other areas as well, Europe, I'm sure, Asia, that can actually recycle the natural fibers themselves, break it down into a liquid, and make new fibers out of this recycled fabric. If you think about how paper can be made into something else, it's a similar process. And most importantly, it's very comfortable to wear natural fibers. They are breathable. They think about, if you just think about clothing on a line, how the air moves them, but it also goes through them. They are quick to dry, maybe not as quick to dry as some synthetics, but they also are, like I said, easier to clean. So they don't retain the permastink you can get from some athletic fibers and fabrics that also break down and wind up in our ocean waters. Just a sec here. But as I mentioned, there are a lot of things to consider when you're making choices, and sustainability is a spectrum. It's not that this is eco-friendly and this isn't. It's that there are trade-offs with everything. And it can be frustrating because the more you do research, the more you learn, and then it can feel like, well, nothing is perfect. And you're right, nothing is perfect. So unless you're going to sustainably grow your own fibers, mill them yourself, weave them into fabrics, create clothing, and then have a plan for breaking them down after they've been used in multiple other ways back into the earth to grow again, there's not going to be a perfect solution. And even then, there are choices that you can make. If you're doing that, then you're not contributing to society in other ways. So there is always a trade-off. So just understanding that and being kind and patient with yourself as you do some research, if you're interested in doing research, or if you want to pursue the resources that I will include in our follow-up here, just know that you're always making a choice. And so making a choice means that there are trade-offs. Cotton, linen, and hemp farming has come a long way. I'll talk briefly about each of these, but cotton, as I'm sure you know, especially in the US, notably during slavery, but also around the world, there's still slave labor picking cotton. It's forced labor in some areas of the world to harvest because it's urgent to harvest it as soon as it is ready. Otherwise, it can break down or be less usable. And we have a long heritage that we need to reckon with here. And there are some groups in different areas, California for one, and then also a giant group in India, which is one of the world's, it's the world's second largest producer of cotton behind China, who are working with different ways to grow the cotton, different ways to produce it, and to turn it into fibers that are usable, and also using rain-fed growing systems so that it doesn't require as much water. When you're purchasing cotton, whether you're making clothes or purchasing garments that are already made or different products that are already made, it's really important to look for organic, Ergotex, or GOTS certified cotton, because those in increasing specificity, those certifications make sure that not just the land is being cared for, but also the people who produce it, the manufacturing facilities, the communities where these manufacturing facilities are located, are all operating in a way that is sustainable for the earth, the community, the people who work there, and then the people who wear the garments. But as you just heard, cotton isn't produced everywhere. It has a pretty short growing season. It requires a pretty stable supply of water, pretty stable supply of sunshine. And for that reason, it needs to be grown in areas that have both of those in abundance. So even if you're choosing GOTS, Ergotex, or certified organic cotton, it's going to be shipped somewhere. You're not always wearing undyed cotton. We have personalities, we have different ideas about what clothing should be for us. And so there are a variety of dyes and prints that are added to cotton fibers as well as linen and hemp fibers in order to make them vibrant and joyful and fitting designers' specifications for what the seasonal garments are going to be. So you want to maybe consider what kind of dyes were used. There is almost always a natural and environmentally friendly option for these. The processing runoff too. Again, if you're using these certified designations to choose your cotton products, then that's going to be looked after for you. Packaging is another thing. Anything you buy is being shipped here. So just be mindful of that. Maybe support smaller producers who have the time, opportunity, and interest in focusing on sustainable and reusable packaging. And then if it's possible, maybe consider looking for local manufacturers, local handmade, local producers of the things that you want to wear, because that cuts down on shipping as well. Something else to consider is the human labor practices. So something can be, unless it's certified, you don't know how the people who are making, growing, interacting with the fibers that you're looking to wear are treated. If you are wearing or using linen, that's been around for 36,000 years, and it's pretty easy to process naturally relative to cotton. It does use water, but it sits in the water so that the fibers separate from one another. And there's some skill required in retting, which is the processing that flax, which is what linen grows from, is used. But the flax plant also is excellent for polyculture farming. It grows well with other crops. That's what that means. It nourishes the ground. It grows very quickly. It has a 100-day growing season. So it can be, it propagates quickly as well. And every part of the flax plant can be used. I'm sure you're familiar with flax seeds. I'm sure you're familiar with linseed oil. Flax plant is also great for grazing. So there's an opportunity there for animals who provide fibers that we can wear as well, like sheep, goats, to graze. And then the soil that the flax plants are grown in require less or no tilling. Also, flax as well as hemp, which I'll talk about next, they crowd out weeds, so they don't require as much herbicide, if any, and they also are more pest resistant than cotton is. So another thing to consider is that linen dries really quickly. You might be familiar with linen having a lot of wrinkles, and you can either embrace that, or I'll tell you coming up how you can maybe prevent those a little bit before you start to wear things. Another consideration when you're making choices about what clothes to wear or make is the longevity of the fiber. Not just how will it biodegrade in 6 months when you've worn through it, but how easily can it be mended, how how stable are the seams that were used? So how sturdy is the construction? And I want to make sure to tell you that you can have sturdy construction and still have light floaty garments. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there are stiff seams. It's possible to do this in a way that is strong and resilient without being heavy. And then another choice that you have to make when you're choosing what to purchase is what kind of care is it going to require? Does it need to be washed? Does it say it needs to be washed in hot water? That's usually a lie. Does it say that it needs to be ironed? Maybe, but that's a choice. These are the kinds of things to consider. Does it say it needs to be dry cleaned? Well, if it's a natural fiber, then that shouldn't be necessarily. Though there are a lot of, at least in my area here in the Pacific Northwest, there are a lot of natural, organic, environmentally friendly dry cleaners. I don't even know how that's possible, so I'll need to do some more research, but that may be a way to clean clothes without using too much water as well. So these are some considerations to make when choosing garments in the first place. Do you have any questions at this point? Anybody?
I don't think anyone has questions, but okay. I love that in the chat we're talking about how just, the sustainability aspect of some of our clothes and increasing the knowledge and experience that we have. And Sarah wrote that she wants to love linen, but she always finds it so uncomfortable.
Yeah. There are different kinds, different weights of linen. I hear you, Sarah. It can be scratchy. Linen that comes from Ireland and Belgium and the northeast of the United States uses much longer fibers. And so when there are longer fibers, it's able to be smoother and finer. So that might be something to consider. Also, in southwestern France, they have been producing linen continuously for 700 years to use for rope making. So rope making probably indicates that it's not as fine a fiber, but they do also grow different varieties of flax that will give finer, more comfortable fiber. So there are, linen isn't a monolith. There are many different grades, just like cotton. If you think about, a terry cloth towel versus a fine cotton blouse, I think about historical clothing. Things were made in a way that was more durable and expected to be worn for many seasons and lifetimes. So maybe take another look at what kinds of linens are available. And maybe linen pants are not going to be your thing. Maybe it's only going to be a loose-fitting tank top that makes linen something that you want to wear. Or maybe you don't have to use linen at all. It's just I feel the same way about hemp, which is the the next one. Hemp, it's probably the earliest plant that was cultivated for textiles. It's very easy to grow. It's a frost-resistant crop. Again, like flax, it is healthy for animals to eat. It also produces seeds that are healthy for humans to eat, packed with protein. In fact, it's one of the most easily assimilable bioavailable proteins that you can have from the plant world. It's also pretty easy to process. It just needs to lay on soil, and the healthier the soil, the more microbes help to ret or break apart the fibers in hemp as well. And it grows pretty quickly. And if it grows before the hot summer hits to whatever length it's going to be, that's when the length of fiber is determined. So after that, it's basically that's your maximum. So the sooner you can plant, and in cooler temperatures, that is earlier and earlier, as opposed to the other fibers I just talked about, the more long fibers and smoother fabrics you can create from that. hemp was a beautiful indigenous crop here in the United States before it was the United States and all over the world. China, 36,000 years ago, I believe, just like linen, it was being cultivated for textile fibers. And the mistaken classification of the hemp plant as a controlled substance, along with the marijuana plant, destroyed the knowledge that we had built up here to process the fibers and to grow things sustainably. So some of that's coming back since the 2018 Farm Bill decoupled some of that. There have been some projects that are reaching out to Indigenous peoples to both encourage and involve them in increasing yield and providing support for their original practices. But I do want to go back. Yes, these are some suggestions, but the most sustainable clothing is what you already own. So this is not to shame you into purchasing a bunch of expensive linen garments. It is to give you some things to consider next time you purchase something. If you can maintain what you already own, it's far more sustainable than going out and buying something else or buying fabric. If you're someone who sews your own clothing, it also requires some consideration where you get your fabric from. It's not as easy as going to the local Joann's to find something appropriate and sustainable. But there is a huge resurgence of natural clothing making and natural dyeing. And so I hope to see a lot more consideration as we reach back to the practices of our ancestors and the ancestors of other people to get us to a point where we are working in harmony with the earth and not against it. What I wanted to mention also is to, consider the life cycle of your garments. So not just where it came from, but where it's going next. Like I said, natural fibers break down pretty easily in the earth or can be compostable. But we want to think about mending, yes, if you'd like to keep wearing the things in the style they are, but you can also change the style of things that you already own. You can dye them different colors. You can modify things that you own that you might feel are out of style or not really suited to you anymore or don't fit anymore, whether they're too large or too small. A lot of times those can be altered and changed to suit your new preferences or your new body shape. So that's something to consider. Another thing to consider would be to donate these garments. And I don't just mean dropping them off at the local Salvation Army or Goodwill. There are a lot of organizations in different cities, depending on where you live, of course, that donate directly to people who need the garments instead of turning them into a new capitalist process. So if you think about one example would be Dress for Success, where garments that are donated are given to people who don't have the opportunity to buy new clothes in order to go on job interviews or to follow a dress code in the jobs that they are able to get. There are different groups that collect clothing for children. And I would encourage you, if you don't know how to mend very well, to maybe practice on garments that you're going to donate. It's a very low risk and high reward way to honor the people you're going to be donating the garments to, so that it can feel like a connected circular process. Another thing you can do if you've worn through your clothes and you don't want to be wearing a patchwork quilt of linen pants, you can cut these natural fibers including wool, including animal fibers, into smaller pieces so that you can use them as rags. Here I have a picture of a paintbrush with paint on it. You can use them again in your creative processes, not just making new things out of them, but using them to facilitate the cleaning and maintenance of your supplies in other ways as well. And also, there are a variety of different ways where you can recycle textiles. I disparaged Goodwill a little bit earlier, but I have to say, here in Seattle, you can drive up with a bag of natural fiber textiles and drop them off for a program called Thread Cycle. And also the city of Seattle pays for that as well. So there are different areas where you can drop those things off. And so I'm sure this is not the only city in the United States or the world that offers those kinds of services. So maybe check into that. Or if there's not something available in your area, here's an opportunity to create it with a few phone calls and maybe putting together a community, gathering a community around sustainability in this way. That's a pretty light lift to make a really big difference. Are there any questions before I move on to cleaning and care? No? Okay. Here we go. I've got a hot take, as Jamie loves and does. You don't have to wash clothes every time you wear them. You don't. When we're talking about athletic garments, yeah, maybe you're going to have to spot clean the armpits and wherever else you sweat the most. Maybe you can just soak them in some vinegar or borax and let them, or use Back Out, which is a product made with plant enzymes by a BioClean company. I have a list of these to kill the bacteria that make them stink, especially if they're synthetic fibers. But you can spot clean them and hang them up. Or if you didn't spill anything, I'm famous for salad dressing on the shelf here. If you didn't spill anything on them, you can simply hang them up. You can, if you're mending things as necessary, they're going to last a lot longer. And you can also use the power of the sun to bleach, though, I wouldn't hang my dark black clothes out for days on end, but I certainly would put them in the sun as a bacteria killer. I used cloth diapers with my first child, and the best way to clean them and to, after washing them, was to hang them out in the sun because they become disinfected. It's also a great way to bring some of the solar energy back into your home. As Flory was talking about, the sun can be rejuvenating, but maybe it's not always great directly on your skin. Why not create an essence of solar energy by infusing your garments with that, or your sheets or your towels, with the side benefit of sun being antibacterial? Another thing you can do is maybe just use different settings on your washer and dryer. Most damage to garments occurs in the dryer. So if you can use a setting that doesn't run very long, doesn't tumble too hard, also with the garments in the washing cycle, if you are spot cleaning, you're not going to need them to agitate as long, and that uses less water. It uses less power. You don't need to use as much detergent if the clothes are mostly already clean, and it takes less time. And there are a lot of choices now for sustainable and biodegradable clothing detergents. In fact, there is even one brand I know of, but I'm sure there are more, called soap nuts, that are literally seeds that you put in a little muslin bag and throw them in instead of detergent because they have surfactant action in them, and they last 3 or 4 washes, and then they're biodegradable. You throw them in the compost bin. So you can go, you can buy some different biodegradable brands at the grocery store, or you can go all the way to using soap nuts, and your garments will get clean. And especially if you are using a low heat, or pulling things out of the dryer before they're completely dry. They will have the opportunity to either dry in the sun or at least in the fresh air, and there will be fewer wrinkles. You won't need to iron as much if you iron things at all, or you'll be more likely to wear them if you don't iron things. And you'll just use less energy, which is always more sustainable. I talked earlier a little bit about how to keep linen from wrinkling so that it's, looking less disheveled and maybe more intentionally the properties of the fabric. When you first purchase a linen garment or linen fabric to make garments or linen sheets or linen towels, if you iron them with a dry iron before you put them in the washing machine for the first time, and then pull them out of the washing machine before put them in the dryer quickly and pull them out of the dryer before they're completely dry, they will wrinkle less over the life of the garment. It doesn't need to be done every time, just directly before you put them in. So that's a trick I learned from my friend and owner of a local fabric store who is in love with linen, and she loves to wear it and is far more particular about how wrinkled her garments are than I am. So hopefully that is helpful and a tip you can use right away. Some best practices. I think I talked about these already. Another thing, you see all these sweaters folded here. I don't know if your mother or other parental figure passed along garment care knowledge. I know I had to go find it myself. I was assigned to do the laundry for my family once I was 7 years old because my mom worked full time and we lived in a single parent household, and it was basically figure it out. And so I didn't have a grandmother who was going to help me figure it out. And I didn't think to go to the library and look up how to figure it out. I just read the directions on the detergent boxes that we had and tried to muddle through that way. But one thing she did tell me was to air dry sweaters always flat. Flip them over once the top side has dried, and to not hang them on hangers so that you can increase the life and maintain the shape of sweaters. So if that's helpful, hopefully you can try that and see how it works. I found that I don't have sweaters coming apart at the shoulder seams anymore. I rarely have holes except for my sharp, dry elbows. And those I mend because I love to be connected with my fabrics and my clothes and to help me back. Maybe this is another hot take. I don't know. I feel like when you purchase something, you are making a commitment to care for it, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And the more mindful we want to be with our wardrobes and with everything we own, really, the more we might want to consider the kind of commitments we're making by purchasing things. All of those criteria I mentioned earlier can be used to help you make the decision that's right for you. Personally, I always try to choose where people are treated best as the first criteria, and then I work my way down through organic and circular and sustainable and that kind of thing. But that is a more recent decision on my part after participating a little bit in the manufacturing side of things and learning about lean manufacturing. But your choice is personal and you don't have to justify it to anyone. This is a practice of stewardship, not just for your garments, but it can be for the communities, like I mentioned, who made the garments or who grew the fibers or who cared for the sheep or who processed the sheep and shear them and turn them into yarn to be knitted into sweaters or socks or whatever it is that you are going to be making out of animal or plant fibers. So here are some other practices. Starting small. You have permission, if you need it, to practice washing only your very favorite thing by hand. One thing. Practice. See how you like it. Diana Ross, mega superstar, hand washed her own garments in her hotel sinks because she wanted to care for them in a way that wouldn't happen if she sent them out for someone else to care for them. Jamie just told me that John Mayer does the same thing. So this isn't just something in the past. And you don't have to be a superstar to wash your favorite blouse. I mean, and if you are nervous that you're going to wreck something, start with your underwear. Start with your not favorite underwear and see how it goes. See how you like connecting with it. Just like washing dishes can be a mindfulness practice, or mowing the lawn, or gardening, so can hand washing your garments. Literally touching them, and they are in conversation with you. So there's an opportunity there to create a relationship, an ongoing relationship. And just like when you clean your home or prepare food, you can ritualize your garment care. There's the opportunity here to make it like magic. You can add herbs that you want to washing water. You can place crystals around. You can light candles. You can say a prayer. You can create a spell in order to make connecting with your clothes and the process of caring for them a beautiful devotional ritual. You can look to your ancestors for what they did in order to connect with them as well. Think about maybe what they wore, what colors they like to wear, what dyes were grown in the areas where they're from, what kind of embroidery and embellishment was used. You can bring some of that into your everyday in order to be more connected with your own lineage. You can connect with your community by donating things that can be used right away. You can come together and mend things together with other people. You can participate in clothing swaps with other people. You can also make things from scratch. If you have friends nearby who want to learn how to make their own clothes, it's a great thing to do together. And it's much easier to laugh at your mistakes when you have friends laughing at their own mistakes too. It's an opportunity for connection with your environment. There is a movement called the Fibershed movement. And I'm sure you've heard of watershed areas. Well, Fibershed is using fabrics and textiles and dyes and materials that come within a local range. You can define whatever that local range is for you, but that might be an interesting challenge to connect with your local environment, especially if you've recently moved. Or you can purchase things from local thrift and reuse places in order to connect with your environment and the people who live there and previously owned the clothes that you might give a new life. And lastly, this is an opportunity to connect with yourself by being mindful about the choices that you make, knowing that there are trade-offs, and making conscious decisions about how you care for things. You are connecting back in with yourself. Conclusion is there's no perfect answer. But as I just mentioned, there are a lot of opportunities for connection, for education, and for passing on a legacy that recent generations before us didn't have the opportunity or interest in doing for us. And that's all for today. Do you have any questions?
I think Sarah asked a question about armpit stains.
Yeah, armpit stains are a doozy. Yeah. Well, because they They come from bacteria and the interaction of your sweat glands with fiber, and probably in between some kind of deodorant. Switching to a natural deodorant can help, but it doesn't always prevent that. Something that our grandmothers used to do that we don't do anymore is, if you have something that's very special, there are underarm shields that you can put in. That's just one more layer of fabric to protect your garments from your own body. And again, drying things in the sun is pretty helpful where that's concerned as well. There are also different kinds of bleach other than sunshine that are environmentally friendlier. I looked up a bunch of them today, and even good old OxyClean it breaks down to hydrogen peroxide. So you can use that, or you can use a different brand of an oxygen bleach that may be helpful in removing armpit stains, and also choosing colors that kind of mask that is another way to prevent them in the first place. Is that helpful? Probably not. I don't know of any magic.
I was going to say, I think my husband was dealing with this, so he did switch his deodorant, which helped a lot. And then he loves going down the deep hole of the internet. So he found out that if you make a paste with Dawn, which is pretty environmentally friendly as far as those detergents go.
Yeah, I just did some research on Dawn. Yeah.
So Dawn with baking soda, and you kind of make it a paste, and you can actually apply it to the armpit area. It kind of helps to break up the oil that sometimes is there, and kind of makes that yellow color, or makes the stain kind of caked in more, because typically deodorant has some kind of emollient action, and that makes it, I think, harder to remove the stain. And then the next step is actually either you wash it out and apply again, or if you want to try hydrogen peroxide is supposed to be pretty good. And then we'll just use our regular detergent, and it usually comes out. There's also, not that the laundress is the most eco-friendly thing, but they have this stain bar that's a very concentrated soap. Really great for if you have to, or if you live with somebody that gets a lot of stains in the collars of their clothing or the sleeves. It's really nice for that. So you can kind of spot treat it and let the soap or the detergent, the surfactant, sit on the fabric a little longer.
Yeah, also back out that that enzyme cleaner that I mentioned before does a good job with the neck stains in dress shirts and that kind of thing. And the research I did on Dawn showed that, first of all, I've been protesting Procter & Gamble for, as long as I've known who they are. But they recently, within the last 10 years, committed to not doing any animal testing that isn't required by law, and also fighting against laws that require animal testing. So that was the reason I was protesting. So I was happy to hear about that. Also, knowing that Dawn is used to clean up fish and wildlife that are in oil spills was pretty fascinating to me. So yeah, and that it's sold in areas where you have to have biodegradable soaps for marine, boating purposes. That, I guess, I'm still trepidatious because it's that blue that's not natural. But yeah, that can be used for stain remover. Any kind of dish detergent actually can be used for stain removal, especially, like I said, the salad dressing shelf. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah. Anyone else have questions or anything they want to just talk about? That was such a eye-opening share.
Well, thank you.